Every single night, your brain does something completely insane and somehow everyone just collectively decided to be chill about it. You lose consciousness, your body basically shuts itself down, and then your mind builds an entire world out of nothing and traps you inside it. And sometimes that world is fine. Sometimes it's a nice little walk on a beach or whatever. Nothing crazy. But sometimes it is one of the most disturbing experiences a human being can have, while technically being completely safe in their own bed, with the door locked and everything. So today we're getting into the horrors of dreams. Sleep paralysis, nightmares, dream core. The moment you realize you're dreaming. What happens when the people in your dreams start acting like they're not supposed to? And a bunch of other stuff your brain apparently thinks is fine to do to you while you're unconscious. Let's get into this. Okay, we have to start here, because this is genuinely the scariest thing your own brain can legally do to you. Sleep paralysis happens when your mind wakes up before your body does. Normally, when you dream, your brain sends out a signal that basically paralyzes your muscles so you don't get up and start acting out whatever's happening in the dream. It's called REM atonia, and it's actually a really smart safety system when you think about it. It stops you from actually punching someone in real life because you were punching them in a dream. Which, fair, that seems like a good system to have. The problem is that sometimes the wires get crossed on the way out. You wake up mentally, your eyes might even open, but your body is still locked in that paralyzed state. So you're just lying there, fully aware, unable to move, unable to speak, sometimes unable to even take a deep breath because your chest muscles are still kind of offline, and your brain, which is still half in dream mode, even though you're conscious, decides this is a great time to start hallucinating on top of everything else. This is the part that really gets people. Sleep paralysis hallucinations are disturbingly consistent across completely different cultures that had zero contact with each other for most of human history. People report a shadow figure standing in the doorway, a weight sitting directly on their chest, a presence in the room that they can somehow just feel with total certainty, even with their eyes closed, like their skin knows something is there before their brain even processes it. Old folklore across the world basically built an entire mythology around this one specific experience, without anyone comparing notes. In parts of history, it was blamed on witches riding the sleeper. In other cultures, it was described as a demon or spirit sitting on the sleeper's chest, which is actually where the word nightmare comes from in the first place. An old mare or spirit that sits on you while you sleep and suffocates you a little. So this wasn't just some modern internet horror trend that people made up for clicks. People have been describing the exact same terrifying experience for centuries without knowing what was actually happening to them biologically. And I think that's what makes it worse, honestly. It's not a jump scare, it's not something chasing you down a hallway. It's just stillness and awareness and something standing there, watching, while your body refuses to cooperate. Some people describe hearing footsteps approaching the bed. Some describe a buzzing or droning sound right before the hallucination kicks in, almost like a warning siren your own brain sends out. Some people say they feel like they're being pulled, or that the bed is sinking, or that there's breathing right next to their ear that isn't theirs. Your own nervous system basically hands you a horror movie and locks the doors from the inside, and then just leaves you in there for anywhere from a few seconds to a few genuinely miserable minutes. The scary part is also how normal it is. A pretty significant chunk of people will experience at least one episode of sleep paralysis at some point in their life, and it tends to happen more when someone's sleep schedule is messed up, when they're sleeping on their back, or when they're just exhausted and running on broken sleep for a while. So it's not some rare curse, it's just a glitch in a system that almost everyone is running. Regular nightmares are almost boring to talk about compared to sleep paralysis, but they're worth digging into because of how specific and repetitive they tend to be across basically everyone on Earth. Falling, teeth falling out one by one. Being chased by something you can never quite see, clearly, no matter how hard you try to turn around. Showing up somewhere important, like a final exam or your own wedding, without being ready for it at all. These aren't random. A lot of dream researchers think nightmares are basically your brain running threat simulations while you're safely unconscious, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, so you're theoretically better prepared if something like that ever actually happens in real life. which is a weirdly practical explanation for something that feels so personal and cruel when you're the one actually experiencing it at 3 in the morning. Recurring nightmares are the creepier version of this whole thing. Some people have the same nightmare, or the same type of nightmare, for years, sometimes decades. Same house that doesn't exist anywhere, in real life, but somehow has a floor plan. Your brain remembers perfectly every single time. Same faceless figure standing at the end of a hallway. Same specific feeling of dread attached to a location your brain apparently built once and just kept the blueprints forever since. And what's strange is that your brain can be incredibly consistent about tiny details in a dream you'll never remember clearly enough to actually draw or describe properly the next morning. It knows exactly where that hallway goes, even if you can't tell me anything else about the house. There's also a specific category researchers call nightmare disorder, which is when nightmares happen frequently enough and are disturbing enough that they actually start messing with someone's daily life, making them afraid to fall asleep in the first place. That's a genuinely rough position to be in, being exhausted and also dreading the exact thing that's supposed to fix the exhaustion. And it's not always tied to trauma either, though it very often is. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's certain medications, sometimes it's just a brain that's a little too good at generating threats out of nothing. Not every unsettling dream is a straight-up nightmare, though. Sometimes it's just wrong in a way that's hard to explain to anyone the next day. You're in your childhood home, except the layout is slightly different, and there's a room off the hallway that was never actually there. You're talking to a friend, and everything is completely normal, except their voice is off by just a little bit, like it's been pitched down half a step, and nobody else seems to notice. Nothing bad is happening in the dream, nothing is chasing you. It's just wrong, and your brain somehow knows it's wrong before you can even articulate why, which is such a strange feeling to wake up with. This is where I have to bring up dreamcore, because it's basically an entire internet art movement built around this exact feeling. Dreamcore is this surreal, slightly distorted aesthetic, empty pools with no water, endless staircases that don't lead anywhere useful, glowing skies that are the wrong color for any actual time of day, playgrounds with nobody in them at all. It's meant to recreate the specific sensation of being in a dream, that liminal in-between feeling where a place is familiar and completely alien at the same time. And the reason it caught on so hard online is because basically, everyone has had a dream that felt exactly like that at some point. An empty version of a place, intimately. A hallway that just keeps going past where it should logically end. A room that shouldn't exist, but somehow makes total sense while you're standing in it. Dreamcore didn't invent that feeling. It just gave it a visual language and a name, which honestly makes it easier to talk about, because most people genuinely struggle to describe what makes a dream unsettling when nothing objectively scary technically happened in it. Related to that is the whole idea of liminal spaces, which overlaps a lot with dreamcore, but isn't exactly the same thing. Liminal spaces are those in-between places. Empty malls after closing, motel hallways, waiting rooms with nobody in them, parking garages lit by flickering fluorescent lights. These places are unsettling in real life for basically the same reason a weird dream is unsettling, because they're spaces meant to be full of people and purpose, and when they're empty, your brain flags it as wrong on some deep instinctive level. Dreams love putting you in spaces like this. You'll be in a store that's clearly closed, or a school hallway at night with all the lights off except one flickering one at the end, and your brain just accepts it as the setting without questioning why you're even there. Here's one people don't talk about as much, but it's honestly one of the weirder ones. Right before you actually fall asleep, in that fuzzy transition zone between being awake and being fully out, your brain sometimes throws out these little flashes called hypnagogic hallucinations. This is different from a full dream because you're not asleep yet. You're just drifting. And suddenly you might see a face flash in front of you, hear your name called clearly from an empty room, or feel like you're falling and jolt awake with your whole body flinching. That falling jolt actually has a name. It's called a hypnic jerk. And it happens because your brain sometimes misreads the muscle relaxation of falling asleep as actually falling through space, so it panics and fires off a signal to catch yourself. Some people get way more vivid versions of this than others. Full sentences spoken by nobody. Brief flashes of a person standing in the room who isn't actually there. Little bursts of music that don't exist anywhere. It's your brain basically starting to dream before you're fully checked out, and because you're technically still half awake for it, it can feel a lot more real and a lot more immediate than an actual dream does. There's also a rarer version of this called exploding head syndrome, which sounds way more dramatic than it actually is. But it's when someone hears an incredibly loud bang, like a gunshot or an explosion, right as they're falling asleep, even though nothing actually happened. No pain, just a sudden violent noise that isn't real, which is a genuinely terrifying way to almost fall asleep. This one is its own special kind of horror because it can go two completely different directions, depending on how it plays out. Sometimes realizing you're dreaming is genuinely awesome. That's lucid dreaming, and if you catch it early enough and manage to stay calm, you can start actually controlling things, flying around, changing the scenery, doing whatever you want, because your brain finally admits the rules don't actually apply here anymore. But then there's the other version. The version where you realize you're dreaming and it makes everything so much worse instead of better. Because now you know none of this is real, but you still can't wake up no matter how hard you try. You're stuck watching your own subconscious play out something horrible, fully aware the whole time that it's fake, and that awareness doesn't help you escape it at all. It's like being trapped behind glass in your own skull, watching a movie you can't turn off and can't leave the theater for. Some people describe trying to force themselves awake in this state, screaming in the dream, trying to pinch themselves, trying to close their eyes inside the dream, and it just doesn't work. Like your brain is refusing to let you leave the simulation yet, for whatever reason. And that gap between knowing this isn't real and still not being able to get out of it is somehow scarier than just not knowing at all would be. There's also false awakenings, which might honestly be the meanest trick your own brain has in its whole arsenal. You dream that you wake up. You get out of bed, maybe start your actual morning routine, brush your teeth, walk downstairs, and then something feels slightly off. Or you actually wake up for real this time, and you realize the entire waking up sequence was just another layer of the dream stacked on top. Some people report this happening multiple times in a row, like nested false awakenings, stacked one on top of the other, and by the third or fourth one, you genuinely start to lose track of what layer of reality you're actually standing in. That's such a specific kind of dread. Not being scared of something inside the dream, but being scared that you can't even trust the part where you think you finally escaped it. Alright, quick pause here. If you're enjoying this kind of stuff, subscribing genuinely helps a ton. I'm trying to hit a goal by the end of the year, and every single subscriber actually makes a real difference toward that. Also got a Discord if you want to swap your own weird sleep paralysis or dream stories with other people. Some of the stuff people have sent me from that server is genuinely unhinged in the best possible way. Anyway, back into it. This might be the most universally unsettling dream experience out of everything on this list, and I think it's because it taps into something really specific about how our brains actually work. Your brain's ability to recognize a face is way faster and more automatic than its ability to actually generate one convincingly from scratch. So when someone you know shows up in a dream, at first it feels completely normal. That's just your friend, your parent, your partner, whoever it happens to be. But then something shifts. Maybe they say something that doesn't sound like anything they'd actually say. Maybe their expression doesn't match what they're saying at all. Maybe they're just a little too still, or they look at you a beat too long before responding, like there's a half second of lag that shouldn't be there. And that's the moment a dream flips from comforting to deeply wrong, without a single objectively scary thing technically happening on screen. Some researchers think this comes down to how dreams are basically built on fragments of memory and expectation, rather than a fully rendered simulation of the actual person. Your brain knows what your friend generally looks like and generally sounds like, but it's not running a perfect copy of them. It's running a rough approximation stitched together from memory, and every so often the seams show through. That's often described as one of the creepiest parts of dreaming, because it's not an obvious monster or a shadow figure, it's someone familiar behaving just slightly outside the range of what they'd actually do in real life. Doors people wouldn't normally walk through. Reactions that don't match the moment at all. A smile that goes on just a little too long before dropping. It's the uncanny valley, except it's happening with people you actually trust and love, which somehow makes it hit differently than any stranger or monster could. And then there's the dreams where people flat out know things they shouldn't know, or reference events that never actually happened, or treat some completely absurd situation as if it's the most normal thing in the world. Nobody in the dream questions why gravity stopped working properly, or why you're suddenly back in a school you graduated from a decade ago, sitting at a desk that's way too small for you now. Everyone just goes along with it completely unbothered, which somehow makes the wrongness even more obvious to you, the dreamer, because you're the only one who seems to notice something is off at all. It's such a specific kind of loneliness, being the only aware person in a room full of people who are all acting like extras who didn't get the full script. While all this is happening in your head, sometimes your body decides to get involved too, which is its own kind of unsettling, mostly for whoever else is in the house. Sleepwalking happens during deep non-REM sleep, which is actually the opposite of when most vivid dreaming happens. So a lot of the time a sleepwalker isn't even acting out a dream at all. They're just running on some kind of half-booted autopilot with the lights half on inside. People have gotten out of bed, walked through the house, opened doors, moved furniture around, and gone right back to bed with absolutely zero memory of any of it in the morning. From the outside, it can look genuinely disturbing. Someone standing in a doorway with their eyes open, completely unresponsive to you talking directly to them, moving with purpose toward nothing in particular. Sleep talking is the quieter cousin of this, and it ranges from mumbling a few random words to holding what sounds like an entire coherent conversation with someone who isn't there. Most of it is complete nonsense that doesn't connect to anything, but every so often someone will say something specific enough or unsettling enough that whoever's listening gets genuinely creeped out, even though the sleeper has absolutely no memory of saying anything at all the next morning. There's something inherently eerie about a person talking clearly and confidently to an empty room while fully unconscious. Quick mention of these because they're genuinely one of the more disturbing sleep phenomena out there, even though the person actually experiencing them usually doesn't remember a single second of it afterward. Night terrors happen in deep non-REM sleep, not during dreaming itself, and they can involve screaming, thrashing around, sitting bolt upright in bed, eyes wide open and staring at nothing, while the person is still essentially fully asleep and completely unresponsive to anyone trying to talk to them or calm them down. From the outside, it looks like someone is living through the actual worst moment of their entire life. From the inside, most people wake up later with absolutely zero memory of any of it happening. It's one of those situations where the horror is almost entirely one-sided, experienced by whoever's watching from the doorway, rather than the person actually asleep in the bed. Here's a weird one that ties a lot of this together. Plenty of people report having a dream about a completely mundane, specific situation, and then weeks or months later actually living through that exact moment in real life, down to small details like what someone was wearing or what was said. This gets explained a bunch of different ways depending on who you ask. Some people chalk it up to pure coincidence and the fact that your brain generates an insane number of dreams every single night, so a few are bound to loosely match reality eventually. Others think it's more about your brain quietly recognizing a pattern from a dream and mislabeling the memory as deja vu in the moment, rather than actually predicting anything. Either way, that specific feeling of, wait, I've been here before, I've done this exact thing before, while your brain insists it's definitely happened, is one of those things that sits in a weird gray area between dream and memory that nobody's fully sorted out yet. There's also just the general phenomenon of waking life bleeding into your dreams and vice versa. Stress about work showing up as an exam you're not ready for. A conversation you had that day getting replayed with slightly wrong dialogue. Sometimes it goes the other direction too, and something from a dream sticks with you so hard that it colors how you feel about a real person or place for days afterward, even though you logically know none of it actually happened. Waking up genuinely annoyed at your partner because of something dream version of them did the night before is a pretty common and pretty funny example of this, but it says something kind of unsettling about how thin the line actually is between what your brain files as a real memory and what it files as something it just made up a few hours ago. Since we already brought up dreamcore and liminal spaces, it's worth talking about how all of this eventually spiraled into an entire internet horror genre, built specifically around dream logic. The most famous example is probably the Backrooms, which started as a single creepy photo of an empty yellow office space with fluorescent lighting and no exits, captioned with something like, "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up here." And that single image basically exploded into this whole shared universe of endless, mundane, wrong spaces. Yellow hallways that never end, rooms that loop back into themselves, pool areas with water that's the wrong color. None of it is scary in the traditional sense. There's no monster jumping out. It's scary because it's the visual equivalent of that exact feeling you get in a dream, where a place is technically normal, but something about the geometry or the emptiness is deeply, quietly wrong. It's basically Dreamcore's uglier, more claustrophobic cousin, and the fact that it caught on so fast, with basically zero explanation needed, tells you how universal that specific dream feeling actually is. Almost nobody had to have the concept explained to them. Everyone just immediately got it because everyone had already dreamed some version of it at some point, without a name for it. Something that comes up constantly when people talk about their nightmares is how oddly repetitive the imagery is across completely unrelated people. Teeth falling out is one of the most commonly reported unsettling dreams there is, and there isn't one universally agreed upon reason for it. Some people connect it to anxiety about appearance or aging. Some connect it to a feeling of powerlessness. Some just chalk it up to your brain literally noticing tension in your jaw while you sleep and translating that physical sensation into a visual. Being chased without ever being able to run properly, like your legs are moving through wet cement, is another extremely common one. And that particular sensation lines up almost perfectly with the muscle paralysis your body is actually in during REM sleep, so there's a real argument that your brain is picking up on the actual physical fact that your legs aren't really working right now, and weaving that into the dream's plot. Showing up somewhere without being ready, naked in public, unprepared for a test, missing your own flight, all fall into the same bucket of anxiety dreams that just about everyone has had some version of. And exes showing up uninvited in dreams is its own extremely common and extremely annoying category, usually with zero relation to actually wanting to see that person again. It's more that your brain seems to like reusing whoever represents a certain emotional category for you. Comfort, betrayal, unfinished business, and slotting them into a scene that has nothing to do with the actual relationship at all. Waking up irrationally upset at an ex you haven't thought about in months because dream version of them did something rude is one of those universally relatable experiences that nobody really talks about outside of texting a friend the next morning like you're not going to believe what happened last night. There's a specific dream sensation that's hard to put into words, but almost everyone has felt at least once, where you're aware you're in a body, but something about controlling it feels delayed or heavy or just off, like you're driving a car with slightly broken steering. Some people describe trying to run and their legs feeling like they belong to someone else. Some describe trying to scream and only managing a whisper, or trying to speak and having the words come out completely wrong even though they know exactly what they meant to say. This overlaps a lot with the same muscle paralysis mechanism behind sleep paralysis, just a lighter, more contained version of it, happening inside a regular dream instead of in that liminal, half-awake state. It's a small detail, but it's one of those things that makes a dream feel less like watching a movie and more like being trapped inside a body that isn't fully listening to you anymore, which is unsettling in a very specific, hard-to-explain way. On the flip side of all this horror, there's a whole practice built around trying to influence what you dream about before you even fall asleep, usually called dream incubation. The basic idea is thinking really intensely and specifically about a topic, a person, a question, right before bed, with the hope that your brain picks it up and runs with it once you're actually asleep. Some people do this to try to solve a problem, since there are actual documented cases throughout history of people claiming they worked out a solution to something in a dream. Some people do it purely to try to avoid nightmares, essentially trying to hijack the topic before their subconscious can choose something worse on its own. It doesn't always work. Dreams are famously bad at following instructions, but it's interesting that people have been trying to negotiate with their own subconscious for probably as long as humans have been sleeping and remembering what happened while they were out. What gets me about all of this is that none of it requires a monster, a killer, or anything external at all. Your own brain is fully capable of building something disturbing enough to make you genuinely afraid of falling asleep, using nothing but memory, imagination, and a slightly buggy paralysis system that occasionally forgets to turn itself off in the right order. No blood, no jump scares needed, just a hallway that's a little too long, a friend's face held a little too still, a loud bang that never actually happened, or the horrible realization that you're fully awake inside your own head and still can't move a single muscle. Anyway, that's it for this one. Let me know in the comments if you've had a sleep paralysis experience, a recurring nightmare, or a dream that still lives in your head. Rent-free, I read all of them, and honestly, some of the stories people share are worse than anything I could have come up with myself sitting here writing this. Thanks for watching, and have a good night. Or don't. Kind of up to your brain now, not really up to either of us.